The art of eating 2 dinners. That's today's story. I had been working just a standard week. I was a little extra tired though. Working in a foreign language, reading in a foreign language, communicating in a foreign language in a foreign culture, day after day can become very exhausting. Those of you that have done that know that it can be quite taxing. And it was one of those days I'd left the office and I had decided I was going to make some instant curry at the house. And instant Japanese curry is not like Thai curry or Indian curry. It's very specifically Japanese. And I knew I needed some ingredients to add to it. So I stopped by the stall where local farmers consolidated their food. I guess it was like a co-op in this outside stall in this building. And this husband and wife ran the stall, and I would pop in there and buy whatever vegetables that they had. The vegetables came from the local farmers. It wasn't glamorous at all. The prices and the names of the vegetables were written on torn off pieces of cardboard and black thick marker. So there's nothing fancy or glamorous about the farmers market as we know them today in America. I popped in to get whatever they had, and there were a couple of carrots, a couple of bell peppers, threw them in the basket of my bike, headed home. I was ready to eat. It'd been a while since I had made the instant curry, so I had to read the instructions, and I just let out a big sigh, a big exhale, because of course all the instructions are in Japanese and I just was tired. I didn't feel like deciphering what the instructions said. But I did anyway because I wanted to eat. I wanted to make sure I made it correctly. And same with my rice cooker. Of course the menu is going to be in Japanese. It's an appliance bought over there for Japanese people. It's not going to be in English. I was making a different portion of rice, so I had to navigate that. And I was like, man, I just want to eat dinner. And I got through all that, got my water boiling. The instant curry I had was like a chocolate bar. You break off pieces and you dump it in the water, and then it would just dissolve and you'd have curry sauce. So my rice cooker dinged, turned off my curry, and sat down and had a very large dinner. I ate a lot that night. And after I cleaned up, I sat there thinking, well, I could have yet another night in my apartment where I just read a book, listen to music, and fall asleep. Or I can go out into the town and, I don't know, have some sort of interaction with somebody. And I was tired, I was full, I didn't really have the energy, I was feeling pretty lazy, I didn't really want to go out anywhere, to be honest. However, it was nagging at me, it was pulling at me. I needed to get out of my apartment. I'd done that too many times, and the isolation can start to get to you if you do it too much. The challenge was even if I could motivate to get out, I lived in a small town. There was nothing to do. There weren't people my age. There just was nothing to do. So I decided, well, I could go to the local restaurant that I like that isn't too far away, and I could get a draft beer or something. So went over to the restaurant. No one was there. There was an older gentleman sitting at the countertop. And that was it. And as it had become habit for me, I'd learned to just say hello to people when I walked into the smallest local establishments. I mean, the place only had 6 tables, and I knew the wait staff and the kitchen staff, so I said good evening to them and good evening to the older gentleman at the countertop, and I went and sat down at the countertop and just ordered a draft beer. Like most places out there, it wasn't an option to say, hey, what beers do you have on tap, or what beers do you have in can? No, it was you either order a draft beer or a canned beer. That's it. You get what you get. So I got a Asahi draft, and I had my electronic dictionary there with me and my little flashcards as well to keep myself occupied and whatnot. And I could sense the older gentleman watching me. That wasn't very surprising. I was watched everywhere I went. People would just sit and stare at me. People would watch out of the corner of their eye. I was a foreigner. I didn't blend in at all. I was definitely the outsider no matter where I went, when I went. And the older gentleman watching me didn't really bother me at that point. I'd become used to living in the microscope, if you will, or under the microscope. Then I looked over at him and he gave me the signal to come join him. And the signal to come join him is a very unique way of waving someone over. It's not the same as it is in America. He got his hand and did that. That's the way you wave somebody over. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go join him. Why not? You know, that's why I got out of my apartment. I'm full, I'm tired, so I'm gonna have to motivate myself internally to get some energy about me so I can actually interact with the guy. So we started talking, doing the introductions. I mean, he was the age of a grandparent. He was much older. And, you know, the staff was watching me as well to see what I would do, how I would interact with the gentleman. And we started talking, and then he asked me if I liked Japanese pickles. And I knew he didn't ask me that because he was curious if I wanted pickles, if I liked pickles. He wanted to know if I would eat them if he ordered them. So I said, sure, knowing that pickles are a tiny portion, they're local vegetables, they're really delicious, and they're very light tasting. So even if I had to eat a couple of bites, I could do it, even though it would be difficult because I was so full. So that's what he did. He ordered a little tiny plate of pickles, and I thought, okay, well, I'll do it in the Japanese style. I'll take a bite, place down my chopsticks, no rush, maybe have a sip of liquid, just hang out. That way I wouldn't have to eat too much. We were talking, and then he asked, you know, do I like eggplant? And I thought, oh no, here we go. He's gonna order another plate of food, and that's what he did. He ordered another plate of food, and I thought, oh man, I'm in now, I'm committed. You know, with each bite and each sip, I felt like my stomach was gonna just explode. I was so full. The older gentleman became comfortable with me, which is a bit unique. The Japanese people aren't known to be overtly personal with strangers. It takes a long time to understand personal information about a person. They just won't reveal it like an American will. You know, conversely, an American might meet you at a bar, and within 20 minutes they're telling you about how their brother-in-law has cancer, and you know, their kid gets in trouble with the police. Like, just they tell you really personal stuff. And this older gentleman started to tell me some personal stuff, which was surprising, and I thought, okay, great, I'll just go with the flow. And he started to open up, and he started to tell me that he was a widower, and that his wife had recently passed a couple years before, and his kids were grown and had their own families and lived in the big city in Tokyo, or in Chiba City, wherever they lived. And I thought, wow, like, no one's ever really opened up to me like that. Like, a stranger's never really opened up to me like that before. And so I thought, wow, good thing I got out of my apartment, because this is exactly what I needed. I needed to soak up some Japanese culture. You know, I wanted to assimilate. I wanted to learn as much as I could. And here I was, the only other person in the restaurant, was providing that environment for me. Also, I had heard about that phenomenon of Japanese men feeling rudderless when their wife dies, for all the normal reasons and also for the practical reasons. Because of the traditional gender roles, the male worked hard, made money, and that's what they did. They didn't do housework, they didn't pay bills, they didn't raise the kids, they didn't fix dinner, they didn't do the dishes. So when the wives would pass, these men were virtually helpless, didn't know how to clean, like all the stuff that we take for granted as modern people. For these older generations out there in the countryside, that wasn't the norm for them. They were very traditionally aligned with their gender responsibilities. So he went on to tell me that he would eat out a lot alone because he didn't really know how to cook, and he was getting tired of instant noodles, instant ramen at home. I thought, wow, like, to meet a man who's experiencing this was fascinating to me. I'd only heard it in articles, or heard it from people who read it in articles, so this was really a great opportunity for me to learn more about him and about this phenomenon. And so we talked, and he said, hey, by the way, do you like mackerel? And I thought, oh no, here we go. You know, like, I can't take any more food. He's being so generous, but I just can't do it. But I said, I'm in, I'm committed. I gotta suck it up. I gotta do it. And we continued talking, and up until that point, I was doing okay with understanding him. I mean, he didn't speak any English, and he kept his Japanese simple enough to where I could understand it. Even in doing that, he spoke a type of Japanese that old men speak, or it's a casual version, or it's a dialect or something, and it's very difficult for foreigners to understand. It's difficult for me to understand, and so I was doing my best, and so emotionally or mentally I was just getting fatigued. I was trying to keep up, and I was hanging in there though. And a little while later, lady brought over some broiled mackerel with miso, and I had a couple little bites, and it was delicious. We talked, and I learned a couple of new words I jotted down on some paper that I would go look up the definitions for later. And there I was in the moment, in the mix with this local man on a weeknight when I could have just been at home in the apartment. So we said our goodbyes. Of course, he wouldn't let me pay for any of the beer that I drank or any of the snacks that I ate with him. You know, it was his treat. I was his guest. And so I thanked him profusely, thanked the restaurant for, he had another good meal and a good time. And I jumped on my granny bike and headed home. And I thought, wow, I just had 2 dinners again, because that wasn't the first time that had happened. You know, the art of eating 2 dinners was something that I had grown accustomed to, unfortunately. You know, meeting these older people, or just people by themselves, seeing a local foreigner, wondering what I was doing out there in that small town, and me wondering what they were doing, and them offering to buy me a dinner. And many times I had already eaten, whether it be at the restaurant or at home, like that night. And I had learned that just suck it up, eat that second dinner. These are the locals, they're inviting you into their culture. They're being gracious enough to offer to engage with me and buy me dinner and buy me food and drinks. And I thought, you know what, shame on me if I don't take them up on that. So I coined the term, the art of eating 2 dinners, because it was just this phenomenon that I was experiencing, but I hadn't heard anyone talk about it before. You know, one of the takeaways from that night was, even in times of discomfort or uncertainty, if I would just go with the flow and push through, something really interesting or great could come out of that situation. You know, as an example, that night I was full, I was tired, and I had a hard time following how he was talking in his dialect. Those were big barriers at the time. You know, thinking back in retrospect, not a big deal, but in the time I was just, I just couldn't do it, but I did it. And I'm so glad I did. Because I did, I was able to learn and meet this man and have a life experience that I clearly have never forgotten.